This is Alabama Politics with Steve Flowers, an in-depth interview with Alabama's top political newsmakers. Now, from the studios of Troy University, here is Steve Flowers.
I'm Steve Flowers, and welcome to Alabama Politics. Folks, we're fortunate tonight to have as our guest one of the outstanding Republican leaders in the city of Montgomery, indeed the River Region, Miss Charlotte Meadows, who is a candidate for the open house seat in District 74 here in Montgomery, in the city of Montgomery. It's one of the few districts in this area that is encompassed in the entire city of Montgomery. It only has the city limits, but Charlotte has been around Alabama politics and Montgomery civic life for years and years. Her husband, Alan, is a well-known allergist here, one of the best doctors in the state, and well-known here in the River Region. But Charlotte has been so active politically and civically in the city. Folks, this seat, District 74, is the seat that former Demetri Policio sat in for about 6 years. Demetri, as many of y'all know, passed away this year at 68. He was beloved, especially in the Greek community. And we're glad to have a good field of candidates. It's a Republican seat, so whoever wins the Republican primary will be the nominee. And we want to welcome tonight Charlotte Meadows. Charlotte, good to have you on the show.
Steve, thank you so much for having me here tonight.
You look very nice, and I've always been fans of you and Alan's, and y'all are a great couple and have done a lot here in Montgomery over the years, and I appreciate y'all. And tell our viewers about how long you've been around, but you're chairman of some Republican club here, aren't you?
I've been,
have been in the past.
Very involved with the Republican Club of Central Alabama. That's the Monday night at Faulkner Club, if you're keeping track. But yeah, my husband and I work together very well as a team. We are both very involved in Republican politics here in Montgomery. I've been the president and the treasurer of RCCA we kind of switch back and forth between doing one job and then another. We're both active on the county executive committee and the state committee. So
Faulkner is actually in that district, isn't it?
It is, yes.
That's what I was thinking. Tell our viewers, if you will, what areas of Montgomery, of the city of Montgomery, is in that House District 74?
You know, this district changed since 6 years ago when I ran the first time. It's actually moved more east than it used to be, but it actually starts about Ann Street, where Lee High School is, goes all the way down the Atlanta Highway on both sides to Interstate 85, and then it goes all the way down the Atlanta Highway to Chantilly on the right-hand side. And then it cuts down Bell Road to Vaughn Road and includes Sturbridge and Halcyon.
It used to have Sturbridge.
It used to not have anything on the other side of the interstate or past Bell Road. So it's extended past Bell Road, down 85, between Atlanta Highway and 85, and then all the way, including some of Wind Lakes and Wind Ridge district area subdivisions.
Some of y'all have Wind. Now, what area of Montgomery do you live in? You and Alan live in?
We live in County Downs. We've been there for about 22 years now.
And where's that close to?
It's right. Well, it's right across the interstate or the Atlanta Highway from Dalrado. You know where the Publix is?
Oh yeah, yeah.
So right there where Head School used to be, and now it's a shopping center.
And y'all raised your children there, didn't you?
We did. We brought them. Well, we moved from Young Place, which is over off Vaughn Road.
Yeah.
When Melanie Beth was about 3, so we had to keep the door locked because we've got a pool in the backyard. Didn't want her falling and drown. Don't make light of that at all. But so we have raised all the kids. They've all left the nest now.
How many children do y'all have?
We have 3.
Tell our viewers about all of them now.
Well, our oldest is Dodge. He's 30 and he works at Reinhardt Motors.
He's here in Montgomery.
He's here in Montgomery. We're thrilled to have him in Montgomery, but he did move out of our house recently and took his cats with him. So we really are empty nesters. We have no pets now. Our second child is Daniel, and he and his wife live in Noonan, Georgia. They got married about a year and a half ago. They have a dog, and we're grand-dog sitting the dog right now.
Y'all don't have any real grandchildren yet?
No, no. He's just been married a year and a half. We're going to give him a little bit more time before we start pestering.
And your babies?
And then the baby just got married right at a month ago. So that's Melanie Beth. She graduated. They all 3 graduated from public schools here in Montgomery, from the magnet schools. and are successfully on their own and on their own paycheck now.
Charlotte, let me ask you: have you ever served? Did you serve on the Montgomery School Board at one time?
I did. That
That's
was
what I
that was my first venture into politics.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
So I was on the board from 2006 to 2012.
For 6 years.
That was one term. Just one. I mean, that's been.
Is that a 6-year term?
It's not now, but it was then. So it changed around 2014. It went to a 4-year term.
And your children were in the public schools?
Yes. And that's what got me involved in politics. Was I saw a need for parents to be more involved on the board level, and ran for a seat that was open or coming open, and actually had no opposition. That was a seat that Mark LaBranch was in prior to that, and he endorsed me at the time, so that was a very easy election. And then we served on the school board for those 6 years, and at the end of that time I felt like my time might be better spent from a policy angle. And so I left the board and started working with a company, or with an organization, a nonprofit called Students First. And we worked on education issues at the State House.
Well, actually, the seat that you're running for, 74, is a seat that was held by Jay Love.
Right.
And Jay was in there for about 10 years, wasn't he?
I think he was there for about, almost 3 terms, I think.
Now, he was chairman of the Ways and Means Education Committee, and he was very vitally interested in education.
Very much.
Yeah.
He actually, when he first got appointed to the committee chairmanship of the ETF, he called me and said, "All right, you might know more about this than I do." And of course, I didn't know a lot, but having currently being on a school board, I did have a basic understanding of school finances and education trust funds. So we walked through scenarios several times.
If you're elected to the House seat, that's the committee you'd like to serve on, Ways and Means or Education, one or the other?
I would like to serve on one of the educations, either the budget or the policy. I'm probably as well versed on the policy issues as I am the budget, but certainly the budget is important.
You'd be perfect for that.
I think so.
You'd be great on that. They need
working
people
on
with
education
experience.
budgets for about 14 years now.
You'd be good. So if you get elected, you'd want to be on the Education and Ways and Means, if you could, one of those two, or both, the Education Budget, Ways and Means.
But I also have some interest in healthcare issues. Because right, we started a medical practice here 28 years ago. Alan, of course, did all the back office stuff, but I set up the front office and have helped him.
You worked with him over the years in the office?
Yes.
Okay, I didn't.
Most doctors don't know how to set up an office and don't know how to run a business. And he has learned a lot. So,
is he still practicing by himself?
Yes, but we have a nurse practitioner. So, in fact, we have a new nurse practitioner that's coming just in the next week or so.
So you were in his office with him for a long time, helped set up the office. I wasn't sure about that.
There was a time when I was the only person in the office with him.
Is that right?
That was some early years, but in those early years, he would come home at supper time. I'd feed him supper, and then I'd leave him with the kids, and I'd go back and finish up the day's the front office stuff and make the deposits and things like that.
Charlotte, I love the way you say supper. That's what I do. You can tell you grew up in the South in this area, because we all say supper. If you get outside this area, people look at you like, what are you talking
is supper?
about?
Well, okay, so Sunday lunch, that's called Sunday dinner.
Right.
But
you can tell you grew up in around Montgomery.
I grew up right here. My grandparents were all here, and when we first moved back to Montgomery, I still had both my grandmothers living here, and of course my grandfathers had passed away. But
what part of the city did they live in? With your grandparents, both your mom and dad's people live here?
My mom's parents lived over in Cloverdale. My dad's parents lived right down here in Capitol Heights. So they were. My great grandfather built the first 2-story house in downtown Montgomery on James Avenue.
Is that right?
So it's still a beautiful place. Last time I ran, it was in the district. At this point, it's moved the district moved that way to the east a few more blocks, so it's not in the district anymore, but it's a beautiful home with stained glass windows, and he was a carpenter.
It still existing?
Oh yeah, still existing, and the people that live there have done some renovations to it and tried to make sure that it stays. It was built in 1915, so it's over 100 years old now, and probably on a list of something, but registry, who knows?
Charlotte, a lot of the best designed and built houses and ornate buildings in not only Montgomery but other cities like Chicago were all built during the Depression, because those artisans and craftsmen were out of work.
Right, they didn't have orders to do other things.
And they were actually part of the WPA thing. The people could almost, and people who privately had some money during the Depression, which very few people did, but the ones who did could really hire the very best craftsmen to do things for their houses. The best, some of the prettiest houses you see here in Montgomery anywhere.
That house was built in stages as he could afford it.
Uh-huh.
And so for a long time, and I could go over there now and show you, now this was the first part of the house, and this is what they added on next, and then they put the front part on, and then they added the wraparound porch, and I mean, all that was done as they could afford to pay for it, because back then they didn't believe in debt. I mean, debt in the 1915s, that was not something you wanted to get into. So
Isn't that something?
it's a very different way of thinking, and something that we've tried to encourage our children to think about debt as only something that's necessary for certain expenses.
Charlotte,
Homes.
did you finish high school here in Montgomery?
I have a twin sister, and we graduated from JD in 1980.
Is that right?
So we were the Borden twins.
Uh-huh. Now, was your family the accountant?
Yes,
John Borden?
Uncle John was my great uncle.
Is that right?
He and my grandfather Joe Borden.
Wasn't he an accountant? He was one of the best,
a CPA.
Yeah, one of the best CPAs in the city.
So Aldridge Borden is a very old company, and
a lot of people in Troy use them
Right.
for their accounting firm. John Borden, I remember John Borden well. He came to Troy. He had some clients in Troy.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's all part of the family.
Uncle.
He's my great uncle.
And that's something. John Borden.
He was a fine man. And
He sure was.
His wife, Aunt Winifred, she put together a book about our family history that's just been an amazing collection from all the way back to the early 1800s. Anyway,
Did you know Miss Neely, who passed away recently?
Yes, she was my middle school creative writing teacher.
Is that right?
So, very excellent teacher. And I've, of course, kept up with her through the years. She was such a historian.
You know Montgomery. You know the history here.
Well, this is, I mean, I hate to say my age too much, but I'm not ashamed. I'm 57, but I've lived in Montgomery for 44 of my 57 years. And 4 of those years I was away was at Auburn. And then 3 of those years, when I first got married, we were in Mobile. So I've lived in Alabama all but 2 years of actually 4 years of my life. 2 years we were in Colorado when Alan was getting his allergy training, and 2 years when I was born in Fort Knox. So
do you know,
most
Charlotte,
of my life, Alabama.
I was writing a historical column recently about Lister Hill.
Yeah.
And people don't realize what a great Montgomeryan he was, and what
a true gem.
What a legacy he left. The UAB's there because of and all the rural hospitals in the country through the Hill-Burton Act, but he was from a very aristocratic family here in Montgomery. Matter of fact, what I got into, and you may or may not know this, but back a long time ago, before the Depression even, before Lister Hill went to Congress in the 20s and saved 12 years from 26 to 38, and then went to the U.S. Senate and took the seat held by Hugo Black and stayed there 30 years. But there were 2 factions in Montgomery of old families, and they were like machines. It was the Hill machine and the Gunner machine. Those 2 families controlled the politics. And who voted was somewhat limited in that era, if you think about it. African Americans could not vote,
and women
could not vote. So you only had, and there may have been some archaic laws you had to pay poll tax. And believe it or not, a lot of the poor folks, especially poor farmers, couldn't afford to pay the poll tax. So you had upper income people were the upper income white people were the only voters.
They controlled the strings, I guess.
And they had the Hill and Gunners had a machine, and old Lister Hill went on and started the machine at the University of Alabama, based on that same.
That does not surprise me, because everybody knows about the machine at Alabama.
Yeah, he started. He was the founder and the first president of the SGA and the founder of what people like for. Well, it is the machine at Alabama, but he grew up knowing about a machine.
Steve, have you ever thought about teaching history somewhere?
Well, I don't know about that, but I do sometimes teach Southern politics once a year.
I mean, You've got
Yeah.
such an incredible wealth of knowledge. And
But not many people realize that Hill Gunner thing. Matter of fact, my mama's uncle, George Grant, was the congressman from here for 28 years, and it was the 2nd District came, Montgomery was the bulk of it, but it came in and got Troy and Andalusia. And he was a lawyer in Troy, and he was my mama's uncle, and the way he won that seat in 1938, Lister Hill went to the U.S. Senate, and the bulk of the vote in the 2nd District was here in Montgomery, and probably 65% of the vote, and the rest of the rural area in Troy were the remainder. But the Hill machine was smart. The Gunner machine back to Montgomery candidate, but the Hill machine went down and got George Grant out of Troy, so Montgomery was split 50-50, and Grant got the votes in South Alabama and won the seat. And you know, once you win a congressional seat, you never lose it.
right.
And he was beat by Bill Dickinson in '64
Wow.
in the Goldwater landslide.
I remember, well, I was very young, but I've heard about that a lot.
In the Goldwater landslide in '64, Bill Dickinson won that seat. Bill was a great congressman. Do you remember old Bill?
I never met him, but of course I remember him.
He looked
He
like
was
a
a congressman when I was all the years I was growing up.
He looked like a congressman. Old Bill looked like a congressman. He was a handsome and very well-spoken and a strong Republican. I didn't mean to get off on all that.
That's very interesting.
Tell me about what you think some of the major issues you'll face if you once you start. Now they've got some tough issues out of the way you won't have to fool with. The gas tax infrastructure thing is passed, and
Right.
you know, the lottery thing may be addressed this time, and even the prison problem. But you still got.
I tell you, one of the bigger issues in Montgomery is still education.
It is. It really is.
And that's something I've, pretty passionate about. Most people who know anything about me know that I'm involved in education. We have just hired a principal for my charter school. So that's going well. That school will open this fall and give parents really the first real options for public education outside of the traditional public schools. So that's something I'm involved in. But some of the issues, I think you really have to look at education overall. And if we cannot improve our traditional public schools, then the entire area tends to go down further. And that's what I want to prevent. I mean, I grew up here. I remember when we had businesses up and down the Atlanta Highway. When I was a child, we rode our bikes to the Packensack and had $1 and spent it on candy, and there was a very safe place to live. And that's what I want to see Montgomery return to. Good schools, good public schools where children feel safe when they go to schools, where parents are comfortable putting their child in the neighborhood school, or where they have a choice of another school. If we have good schools, then kids are engaged in their education, and the parents feel comfortable with them going there every day, and they'll stay in school. And right now, our kids are dropping out, and they're going around town, walking the streets during the school day. They don't have anything to do, and they can be up to no good in many cases. And you hear about young people who are 14 and 15 who are carrying guns and shooting guns into, cars with people in them. And we hear about that regularly nowadays. And that is so not what Montgomery used to be like, and not what we need for Montgomery to be like now. So I think that if we can start to work on bringing our education up, making sure that teachers are paid like professionals, and that the teachers are engaged in what they're doing, and that students are as well, then that will help to decrease our crime and also bring businesses back. Because right now, a lot of the employers, one of the reasons I got involved in education is because when I was trying to find someone to work just a high school degree job in Alan's office, I couldn't find anybody with a resume that I felt like was a solid person without mistakes on the resume who had a traditional high school diploma. And that was one of the first reasons I thought, this is not right. So we've got to do a better job educating students so that they can leave high school ready to work. And that's, you hear a lot about career tech these days. I'm not even talking about careers. They just need to be able to find a job in an office setting or in a place of business where the people there can count on them to show up to work on time. We call those soft skills. But that's a big part of what our school system needs to be doing. Now, the school that I'm working with is going to be a STEM focused, science, technology, engineering, and math. But when the students graduate, they will either have some certifications or dual enrollment so that they are ready to already go into college or ready for a work job. I mean, a real job, not a McDonald's paying job.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with McDonald's. But that's really critical that we increase our level of expectations for our children.
Charlotte, you're wise to realize that and very prudent to put an emphasis on that, because that is Montgomery's problem right now. You've nailed it right there, is the education system. And it's causing everything to diminish in Montgomery. You've got to have an education system, and you having the background you do and the experience you have and the interest you have is important. And I would think that those that are running for mayor of Montgomery this year, that ought to be their emphasis too, because the education level and will thwart the crime problem. You agree with that?
Totally. And if we don't do something serious about our education, our crime will get worse. And honestly, Steve, you know, I see and hear the same types of things that everybody else in Montgomery sees and hears, and the news doesn't cover it very often. But we hear about gunshots, and we hear about people that were, you know, killed last night, you know, in front of the Walmart where I shop. This was just a couple of weeks ago on a Friday night. We were having dinner about a block away from there. And that is so unacceptable. And it was a kid, you know, 14 or 15-year-old.
Did he die?
Yes.
Was it
Well, no, he was the one who was doing the shooting.
Okay.
The person who was shot, I think, was 20 or 30 years old. But the person that was shot died right there on the street. I wasn't there and didn't see it, thankfully. But, you know, that's not what Montgomery should be about. I mean, and, you know, if people want to act like that in Chicago or, you know, Las Vegas or something, that's their business. But in Montgomery, we care about people. And the kids that are out there shooting and the people that are being killed and dying, that's somebody's family member. And I know, you know, we've had children in the schools that have been shot and killed. And that's just so horrible. I mean, but it's also horrible that we're not doing a better job educating these same kids. And I really believe if the kids that were out there shooting the guns had really been introduced to something that interested them in, say, elementary and middle school, can't wait till they're in high school. By then they're checked out. So we've got to do a better job in their 5th and 6th grade before they get, you know, as they're getting into middle school, figure out what it is that turns them on. And a lot of kids these days is games, but the gaming, you have to explain, okay, the gaming, you have to learn about math. There's a lot of math and all that programming stuff and coding and robotics, and those are things that there's such a vast career opportunity for young people, and we've got to show them, you know, this is what happens if you learn your math. You can become a programmer and design all these, you know, games that kids like to play these days. So it can be done. It just is hard work. So,
well, you're, like I say, you're all wise and very wise to realize that as a legislator and having all the city of Montgomery in your district, that that is the key to Montgomery's survival and growth is the education system.
and we need to be able to bring businesses back to Montgomery. I mean, we're right here in the heart of the state, right with the capital. I mean, if the capital weren't, I mean, the capital is we're the district that's the closest to the capital without being the capital being in it. And it just is really important that we show the state that Montgomery can have good education, Montgomery can attract good businesses, not just government businesses, but also other businesses. We've got, you know, some great manufacturing jobs here.
Yeah,
But we need to be able to provide employees for those manufacturing jobs.
Charlotte, talking about your proximity to the Capitol, one thing that I'm sure you're cognizant of is that your district would be one of the biggest state employee districts in the state. So you'll need to be real active on behalf of state employees.
That's exactly right, Steve.
You've got a lot of state employees in that district.
That's something that I've met a lot of state employees. I appreciate a lot of the work that our state employees do. I know they've not, we've been through quite a number of years without them getting raises or COLAs, and I respect the fact that they deserve some compensation for what they've done and what they're doing. I think particularly we've got a lot of retirees in the area that, you know, that's, you know, there's a lot of things.
A lot of your neighbors, you know well.
Right, right.
If you went through your neighborhoods where you know where you're campaigning door to door, I bet you knocking on a lot of doors that are retired state employees and also retired military.
I was about to say, also retired military. We see a lot of the cars in the driveway that said retired U.S. Air Force or National Guard. I met a man this morning who was retired Army National Guard. So there are a lot of retirees in the area. Probably where I think I'm wondering is where are all the young middle-aged people, the people who are raising their children. Most of the people we're finding are relatively young and still living at home, or like 50 and above. So the district, and what that tells me is that Montgomery doesn't have as many young people here, and you know that by looking at the schools. We've had a lot of people have left the schools.
Yeah.
So I mean, you see the numbers of students that we don't have anymore that we used to have. So that's a concern when you're losing your young people.
Yeah, it is, and it goes back to what you're talking about.
It
about
does.
the education level. But state employees and retired military are important in Montgomery, have been over the years.
Right.
I was talking with Todd Strange one time, and I was talking about state employees, and he says that Maxwell Gunner is still the #1 employer in Montgomery,
right,
in the River Region.
And then I think Baptist Health is the second, and Montgomery Public Schools is the third.
Is that right?
That's what it used to be just a couple of years ago. I don't know if that. I would imagine that's still pretty close to accurate.
Well, I tell you one thing, you're a good person to be running for that House seat, but our time's up, Charlotte. It goes by in a hurry, doesn't it?
That does go by in a hurry. Steve, thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Oh,
it's been great to be with you.
Folks, our guest tonight has been Charlotte Meadows, Republican candidate for House District 74 here in Montgomery. The special election for that seat is June 11th, right around the corner. So Charlotte has been an active member of the Republican Party and an active member of the school board and a civic leader here in Montgomery for years, and she's very well qualified to be your representative in the House District 74. And again, thanks Charlotte for being with us, and we thank you viewers for watching. Hope you tune in again next week for Alabama Politics. Thank you. Goes by in a hurry, doesn't it?
That does.